By the year 2204, 20 million people will be living on Mars. Stay with me. Those are the words of Paul Dienach, a man who 100 years ago had a glimpse into our future. Welcome, come in, you can never leave. Firstly, thank you so much for the support on the last video. Your punishment is listening to me talking about time travel. You encouraged me. And before we begin, have you got any weird stories that you would like me to cover? Internet myth, for example. We all love time travel movies. Back to the Future, The Terminator, The Butterfly Effect 2. If you could go back in time, where would you go? Perhaps watch Iron Mike in his prime and record it on my smartphone? Did you see it? Here it is again. It's like, where's Wally? There he is. Was a time traveler accidentally caught on camera years before smartphones were invented?
Like an iPhone in the crowd with the light on.
In 95. In 95.
You know, cameras back then were big with the big.
Or is there a simple explanation, such as perhaps he was using a portable video camera like this, which was available in that year, probably quite hard to get hold of, probably very expensive, but theoretically possible. I f***ing love clips like that. But then again, I like Lego games, so don't listen to a word I say. So alleged time travelers coming back in time and warning us about the impending doom of our future are everywhere on YouTube, like this channel which seems to go to the park and interview kids skipping school.
Brings me to the year of 2018 is the fact of with things that are going on in today's day and age, I came back to study.
Debunk that. But there are actually some more interesting cases of alleged time travelers. Before we get to the story of Paul Dienach, let me whet your appetite. 1905, an image of men hard at work. Someone didn't have their Weetabix. Sorry, I got distracted. A picture where one man stands out from the crowd, who has been referred to as Mohawk Man, or what I call time traveling Travis Bickle. There is something that just doesn't feel right about his inclusion in that photo. And so here is an innocent picture taken in the early 1940s documenting the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, Canada. Notice anything out of the ordinary? In amongst the ladies and gentlemen of the crowd dressed in clothes of the time is Blade Runner. Sunglasses, graphic tee and Primark jumper. It'll fall apart in a week. And not just that, he's got the DSLR camera handy. And so this is a completely real photo. It's not edited, it's not photoshopped. People have even been to the museum where it was found to confirm its validity.
Is the original? Is this the original?
Oh!
I could critique the idea that he's a time traveller, but I'll just leave that one with you. And so why was a lady caught talking on a mobile phone in the year 1928? So this anomaly was found by absolute nerds who analysed a Charlie Chaplin film and found this in the background. So she appears to be talking on a mobile phone, which of course wouldn't have been possible in 1928. And then 10 years later, another clip was found. Did you see it? And so this is a hugely viral clip, a lot of debate about it. Her name was Gertrude Jones, who was allegedly testing a wireless device. But my question is, if she was chatting on the mobile phone in 1938, who is she talking to? And so the time travelers caught on camera and type of legend is everywhere. And Greta Thunberg and Nicolas Cage, apparently. But one of the stories that really made an impact and still has a subculture to this day is that of Paul Dienach. His story is just peculiar. Paul Dienach was a professor of humanities who sadly, after suffering from encephalitis lethargica, fell into a coma in 1921. Upon waking from his coma a year later, Paul had an incredible message to reveal. He claimed that during his coma, his consciousness shifted into the body of a scientist named Andreas Northam. Okay, a bit weirdly specific, in the year 3906. But what makes the story so intriguing is that Paul didn't tell anyone any of his story at all. It was only after Paul's death from tuberculosis in 1924 that this information was accidentally found. A student of Paul's called Yorgos was tasked by Paul with translating a diary belonging to him from German to Greek after his death. And so as Yorgos began translating the notes, it soon became apparent that this diary was extraordinary. It detailed that a new species of human beings, Homo occidentalis novus, would emerge, that's easy for me to say, contact with aliens would develop, and the impending doom of our future. If this was a hoax, he really was playing the long game, as in the long game being after he's dead. But let's back up. So Paul Dienach fell into a coma in 1921 from a neurological disease that swept Europe, and then during an unperceivable amount of time later, what seemed like hours to Paul, he woke up, but in a hospital room unlike anything he'd ever seen, being spoken to by doctors whose language he only understood in parts. And so Dienach told the doctors that he became ill, that his name was Paul, he's from Switzerland, but Paul is told by his doctors, no, your name is Andreas, you are a physicist and you've had an accident. And so of course Paul looks confused and the doctors ask him, what year is it, Andreas? And Paul says, 1921. Startled, they explain to him, the year is 3906. And so in disbelief, he's shown the city from his hospital window, and it's basically Total Recall. The original, how it was meant to be. How dare you, Colin Farrell? And so a few days later, once Paul has calmed down, he's introduced to people called the electors, the wise ones, the chieftains, the leaders, you get the idea. And so they understood that the consciousness of Paul had been transferred to Andreas and explained to him that time is not linear and consciousness is everywhere all at once. Don't ask me to explain that. And so subsequently, a friend of Andreas called Stefan is used by the electors to visit Paul each day and to explain to him what's going on in the current time. And so for what seems weeks to Paul, he's told of the current affairs of the time, but carefully shielded from the information from around his time of 1921, the Butterfly Effect 2. You see, it does all come together in case when he does return, he alters his timeline. And so weirdly, Paul in his diary also noted how he used a handheld device which had sounds and images, which was an incredible learning device, which kind of sounds like a smartphone or a tablet. Kind of amazing for him to have written down in 1921. 3906, one of those. He also got to level 30 on Angry Birds. But long story short, get to the meat. What was Paul told about our future when he was occupying the body of Andreas Northam? Let's get dystopian. From the year 2000, after several hundreds of years of overpopulation, starvation and conflict on Earth, by 2204 we end up colonizing Mars. And eventually that leads to a colony of 20 million people who live happily ever after, until they're all killed in 2265. And so an extinction event occurs on Mars, some type of natural disaster, basically the dinosaurs. But things did start to get better back on Earth. Nuclear war breaks out in 2309, and so the war lasts for 80 years, and so most of the world's population is killed. And so that happy event leads to the creation of a new global government in 2396, formed of scientists and humanitarians, not politicians. Imagine that. And so over the next several hundred years, the focus was on removing scarcity of resources and improving quality of life. And so this eventually leads to people working less of their lives, retiring earlier, having their needs met, their clothes, shelter, food. It wasn't hard to come by anymore. And then by 3382, something incredible will happen to us. People evolve and they develop a sort of new spirituality known as hypervision and enlightenment, accessing greater planes of consciousness, if you will. And the human brain develops as a consequence. And a new species of human has developed, Homo occidentalus novus, focusing on the greater good, not cutting the queue at the bus stop, basically. We develop into a selfless species of human. And so money has become obsolete. And by this time, technological advancement and automation means that by the year 3906, people only work for 2 years of their lives, and then people are free after those 2 years to explore their passions, whether it be art, music, engineering, whatever that may be. And there are very few laws, they just aren't needed. Basically, future us are way nicer. And so they also had contact with aliens and everything went fine. And so there's a lot of detail that I haven't included in the story, but it is noted in this book, which was written by Paul's students. It's just a weird story. The phenomenon of the coma, the way it was revealed after his death in a personal diary, the strangely specific details Paul gives, even down to naming future world leaders. For example, one of whom was called Torhild in 2823. So was Paul Dienach a hoaxer of epic proportions all the way back in 1921? Or has he actually seen our future? Well, time will tell and we will find out. Well, we won't, we'll all be dead. But future generations will, and I expect all of you in the future to like, subscribe and follow this channel. See you soon.